Hi everyone, it's Gemma aka Jam Jar Sews from Instagram, and I'm here for another exciting but slightly terrifying for me, which I will explain in a second, autumn winter sewing project with the lovely people at Bombay Stores Fabrics. The reason I say exciting but slightly terrifying is because we're going to be doing two things today that I've never done before. So we're going to be making a coat, and we're going to be using some absolutely gorgeous wool fabric from Bombay Stores Fabrics. The pattern we're going to be using today is actually a free pattern that we've downloaded from the Mood Fabrics website, and it's called the Blackthorn Coat pattern. And so what you can do with this is you can download it from their website, and then you basically print it all in A4 pages, and then you stick all those A4 pages together using the guide, and then you cut out your pattern pieces from there. So the fabric I'm working with today, I'm so excited about. When I saw it on the Bombay Stores Fabrics website, I absolutely fell in love with it. And when it arrived, it was even more beautiful than I was expecting. So it's this sort of like red / terracotta and black houndstooth print. And this is actually polywool, so it's not 100% wool, but it's really beautiful and thick and heavy. It's in a grey variation, and they've got some other gorgeous wools and polywools. So I really recommend checking these out. It's absolutely beautiful quality. So that's our fabric. We're also going to be lining the coat. So I've just got this lovely black lining fabric, which again is from Bombay Stores Fabrics, and also has the option to add a self-covered button, sort of like in the middle as a fastening. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to add that yet, but if I do, I'll show you how to do that. Otherwise, there's lots of great tutorials out there for doing self-covered buttons. And Bombay Stores Fabrics also stocks a large range of buttons that you can check out. Also, I have matching black thread again from Bombay Stores Fabrics. When I downloaded the pattern, I was pleasantly surprised to find that this particular pattern is suitable for beginners and doesn't have lots of pattern pieces. So the pieces that we have are a giant sleeve piece. I also love how big all the pattern pieces are for the coat. So we've got this sleeve piece, and for the sleeve piece you need to cut out 2 in the fabric and then 2 in the lining. And on your pattern it also gives specific instructions, where in some cases it says cut 1 inch shorter for the lining, because obviously you're going to turn the cuffs up and the lining doesn't need to go all the way down. So just keep an eye on that when you're cutting out the pattern pieces. We have a front facing, and I understand that this bit will form part of the collar. I'm not exactly sure how yet, but I'm excited to see how that comes together. We've got the coat back, which is 2 pieces that we'll sew together. And then we've got the coat front, which is again, we've got 2 separate pieces. Very excitingly, we have pockets, and probably the biggest pocket I've ever sewn. So that's great. The pocket is lined as well, so you cut 2 in your main fabric and 2 in the lining. So I have done a bit of research on sewing with wool or polywool. I think I am going to use a ballpoint needle rather than a normal needle, because that seems to work quite well. The benefit of using a ballpoint needle, which is the same sort of thing as you'd use with jersey or stretch fabrics, is that they go in and sort of in between the yarns rather than trying to pierce through it. Apologies to anyone if I'm getting this completely wrong, but my understanding is that then it will make it less likely to snag the fabric. The instructions in the pattern say to start on the lining first. I'm actually going to rebel against that, and I'm going to sew the main body of the coat together first. So the first sewing step is to attach your back pieces together at the centre seam. So you're just going to sew all the way down that long seam, making sure you've got right sides together. And the seam allowance, I think, for most of the seams on this pattern is 1/2 inch. Put your back pieces together at the centre seam, you'll then have something that looks like this. And the next step in the pattern is then to attach the 2 front pieces, not the front facing, the front pieces, to the back pieces at the side seam. It's not entirely clear from the instructions, but I think that what you're supposed to do is match up like the top, the bit where the shoulders will go and where the sleeve will go in. The front pieces attached at the side seams. We then, from my understanding of the pattern, although I admit I'm not completely clear, we then work on these sort of extended bits that form part of the like shawl collar, I think it's called, that comes round. So the first step is quite simple, is to sew those straight edges together. I've then gone ahead and overlocked those seams. So that's the 2 straight edges I've sewn together. and that's my long centre back seam, so that those edges are finished. What you do is you pin your collar piece to your main part of your coat. It's a little bit tricky because the collar piece is square around the sort of neckline, whereas the back part has kind of a more of a rounded collar. So I found that a little bit tricky. So I'm just going to sew that quite slowly. So just to show you what that looks like once you've sewn it in place. So this is our sort of shawl collar piece. This is the first straight line that we stitched together. I then pinned the remaining collar piece, like where the kind of gap was between the front and the back piece. The first step on the sleeves is simply to pin them right sides together. Both your sleeves are sewn together. To insert them, you don't need to do any gathering stitches or anything on the top, they'll just fit right in. But I like to turn my jacket, main jacket piece inside out, so that's the wrong side of the fabric. But then I have my sleeve the right way out, so that's the right side of the fabric. And then what I do is I feed my sleeve right side out through the armhole. So then I've got my sleeve here in my armhole, and I will pin that together, matching the side seams of the sleeve and the jacket. And basically all I need to do is then pin around there, and I will sew that again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've sewn the sleeves in, we're going to work on the patch pockets that go on the front of the jacket. So we've got 2 of these rather large pockets, and basically to construct them, the first thing we do is pin the lining to the right side of the pocket piece. Now in the picture on the website, I don't know if I cut out my lining wrong, it's possible, maybe I should have made the lining 1 inch shorter, but it seems that there's a gap between the top edge of the lining and the top edge of the pocket, which I don't have. So what I've done to accommodate for that is I've just folded down the lining piece here. And our first step for both pockets is to pin those 2 lining pieces together there, and then just to sew around the outside to attach those 2 pieces together. Those pieces together, so you can see I've got the flap sort of folded down here, so I've got this bit exposed. I think that's so when we turn it inside out, you can fold down that edge so it's not a raw edge. So all I've done is just stitch around the edges, and then I'm just going to finish off these edges on my overlocker, and then we'll turn the pockets inside out. Now I've turned my pockets inside out, I've then just pinned all the way around, ready to top stitch. And I have also finished this edge, top edge off with my overlocker, and then I've like pinned it down like that. And so you've got your lining here at the top of your pocket. Okay, so to attach your patch pockets to your coat, you're going to want to use this pattern piece. So this is the front of the jacket. It's been cut here. It doesn't include the facing because I've used this to cut out the lining piece, which I will explain shortly. But basically this has a marking, it's quite faint, you can see I've started to outline it there with a Sharpie, of where your pocket should go on your coat. So basically I've laid that over on the left side, and I've just put a pin, 1 pin here and 1 pin here, to sort of mark the corner of where it should go. And I pinned my first pocket on, and then I flipped the pattern piece over and kind of laid those pins again. But I then did measurements. So this is my first pocket that went on. To put the second pocket on, I did the first thing with the pattern piece, but then I went and measured sort of the distance between the pocket corner, the front of the facing, the distance between this pocket corner, the edge, the distance between the bottom of the pocket and then the bottom of the coat. And I kind of used those measurements to try and get the second pocket on as symmetrical as possible. Sewing your pockets on, we're then going to set the main coat aside, and we're going to work on the lining. So you cut out the lining again using the pattern pieces, just paying attention to where it says cut 1 inch shorter for lining, or there's a cut line on the main front piece because the lining doesn't include the facing, because the other side of the facing is actually made out of the main fabric. So as per the main coat, we start with sewing our centre back seam together, and I've sewn that together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I've overlocked the edges where I could. But my overlocker doesn't seem to love this lining fabric, it's quite shiny, I don't know if that's why, so I kind of did a mixture of overlocking and pinking shears, but obviously up to you how you finish. So then we sew on our front pieces at the side seams as we did before, and then it says to sew in the sleeves. I got a bit confused here, and I'm not entirely sure if I've done this right. So I kind of sewed up the shoulder seams I did have, but it does sort of leave this gap, which I'm hoping when we attach the facing to the lining, that will make sense. But anyway, I then sewed in my sleeves like normal. And the next step is then you've almost got this shell, and that's gonna go on the inside of the coat and be your lining. But before we sew this onto the main part of the coat, we are going to work on the facing pieces. So you should have 2 facing pieces cut in your main fabric. And the first thing we do is we sew this edge together at the top, again, like we did with the coat body part. Once you've sewn those short edges together and you finish that seam however you wish, the next step is then to pin the facing piece to the lining. Slightly different to the main body of the coat. When we're pinning the facing on, we've got to pin all the way down the sides as well. Whereas when we were making the main coat, we only had to attach the top here to the back piece. Okay, so now I've sewed my lining to my front facing piece, and as I said, I'm not entirely convinced that I did it completely right, but it seems to have worked okay, so that's good. Please comment below if you've worked out the right way to do it. And the reason I'm not sure is because I've got like at the shoulders, it's just I've got like a little bit of lining fabric and then a big bit of the main fabric, so that's where I think I've maybe gone wrong, but the whole thing fits together fine, so that's good. So then our next step is, once you've got the facing attached to the lining, is then to pin the lining piece to your main coat. And to do that, you simply pin your front facing pieces. So this is my front facing piece here, attached to my lining here, to the edge of the coat, to the edge of the facing on the coat. So we've got our lining here, our front facing that we've attached to our lining, and then this is our main coat piece. After you've sewn that edge and you've finished it, you're then going to flip everything over. So then you're going to flip your lining to the inside of your coat, and your sleeves should fit into your sleeves of your main coat. It's very exciting when this bit happens because I'm always surprised. Once you've flipped your lining and your facing to the inside, you should have something that looks like this on the inside. So this is where we've stitched our lining to our facing, and then we've got the facing and then the outer part of the coat with the collar on. And so now it's looking nice and neat down here and on the sides. And then the final step I'm going to do in making my coat is I've already done it on this side, so then I'm going to attach my lining to my main fabric and hem my sleeves and the bottom hem. So this is done with hand stitching, and all I've done is I've first of all turned in the main fabric. So I've turned that down, I'll try and show you there. So I've kind of tucked that in to the length that I want, and I've tried that on, and I've done the same with the bottom hem. And then I've taken my lining fabric and I've folded it down so it's about 1 centimetre shorter than the sleeve, because you don't want your your lining poking out the bottom, but it's up to you. You can have it shorter if you want, you can have it closer to the edge, but I thought the centimetre was quite good. That seemed to be what the pattern indicated as well. And then you just slip stitch that down, and that's going to encase the raw edge of your main fabric, and then you've got encase the raw edge of your lining. The final step, if you want to, is then to add a self-covered or regular button and do your buttonhole. I'm actually not going to, I quite like the coat as it is, but if you want to do that, as I said, there's lots of great tutorials out there for how to do self-covered buttons. I also filmed a tutorial on this channel about how to make this shirt, and in that video I go through about how to do buttonholes on your machine. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I hope you found it useful. Very proud of us all for making a coat. Well done, we got through it. We're going to look amazing in our coats when it gets colder. And if you do follow this tutorial, please share your creations with us on Instagram at Bombay Stores Fabrics. Really look forward to seeing what you've done. Thanks everybody, bye!